Having studied the various features of medulla oblongata and pons, let us now move on to the midbrain. In this video, let us begin by studying its external features. Midbrain forms the uppermost part of the brainstem and also the shortest part, barely measuring about 2 centimeters in length. It's derived from the mesencephalic vesicle. It is located in the upper part of the posterior cranial fossa, where it will be traversing through the tentorial notch or the tentorial incisure. Thereby, it connects the infratentorial hindbrain structures with the supratentorial forebrain structures. Let us study the external features of the midbrain as seen from the ventral aspect, dorsal aspect and the lateral aspects. On the ventral aspect, we see a pair of cerebral peduncles. The crus cerebri forms the anteriormost part of this cerebral peduncles. The cerebral peduncles are related laterally to the parahippocampal gyrus, which is a part of the temporal lobe of the cerebral cortex. And medially, the cerebral peduncles form the boundaries for the interpeduncular fossa or cistern. The name interpeduncular is because it is located between the two cerebral peduncles. It's a rhomboid-shaped area bounded anteriorly by the optic chiasma, anterolaterally by the optic tracts, posterolaterally by the medial borders of cerebral peduncles, and posteriorly in the midline by the upper border of pons. Floor of this interpeduncular fossa is formed by the structures seen on the inferior aspect of hypothalamus. So from before backwards, they are the tuber cinereum with infundibular stalk. Please do not confuse this tuber cinereum with the tuberculum cinereum, which we saw on the lateral surface of the lower part of the medulla. Behind the tuber cinereum, we find a pair of mammillary bodies. Further posteriorly, there is a darker area perforated by central branches of posterior cerebral artery known as posterior perforated substance. Within this interpeduncular fossa, we see the oculomotor nerves exiting along the medial sulcus of the cerebral peduncle. Other contents within the interpeduncular fossa are the circle of Willis and the CSF. Circle of Willis is actually an anastomotic channel formed between the two-sided internal carotid arteries and the vertebrobasilar system. In addition to these features, we also see on the ventrolateral aspect the emerging trochlear nerves. These will have exited on the dorsal surface of the midbrain. They wind round the lateral aspect of the midbrain and will be seen on the ventrolateral angle here before they pierce the tentorium cerebelli. Now coming to the dorsal aspect, the main features we see are 4 rounded swellings, a pair of superior colliculi above and a pair of inferior colliculi below. Together they are known as corpora quadrigemina. These 4 rounded swellings are separated by the cruciform sulcus. Upper end of this cruciform sulcus has a depression which is occupied by the pineal gland. On either side of this pineal gland, we find the pulvinar of thalamus, which is the posteriormost part of the thalamus. Posterior to each side pulvinar, we find lateral geniculate body and the medial geniculate body. Now, superior colliculi is involved with visual responses or visual reflexes, and this is connected with the lateral geniculate body by means of a fiber bundle known as superior brachium. Inferior colliculi are a part of auditory pathway. They project to the medial geniculate body by means of inferior brachium. Now, below the inferior colliculi, we find a thin sheet of white matter known as superior medullary velum. It is raised to form a fold along the midline known as frenulum veli. This superior medullary velum connects the two-sided superior cerebellar peduncles. Superior medullary velum goes on to form the roof of the upper half of the fourth ventricle. Just below the inferior colliculi, on either side of the frenulum veli, the trochlear nerves exit. These are the only cranial nerves which are exiting on the dorsal aspect of the brain. Now coming to the lateral aspect, as I said, the midbrain will be traversing through the tentorial incisure. So the lateral aspects are related to the medial border or the free border of the tentorium cerebelli. Above the tentorium cerebelli, the lateral surface is crossed by the optic tract, basal vein, and the posterior cerebral artery. And below the tentorium cerebelli, the lateral surface is crossed by the trochlear nerve and the superior cerebellar artery. In the supratentorial compartment, this lateral surface is related to parahippocampal gyrus. Now coming to the cavity of the midbrain. The cavity of the midbrain is known as cerebral aqueduct or aqueduct of Sylvius. It's a narrow canal resembling the central canal. It connects the fourth ventricle, which is the cavity of the hindbrain, with the third ventricle, which is the cavity of diencephalon. And see the axis of the cerebral aqueduct. It runs forwards and upwards. That's the same direction in which the midbrain will be bent. Thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed this video. You can visit this site for other videos on neuroanatomy. Thank you.